I'm now delighted to hand over to Nick van Marken for our first session. Nick really doesn't need too much of an introduction. So all I'll say is that he considers himself to be an African at heart, as he spends so much time there on the continent. Nick, welcome.
Matt, thanks very much. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic to be here. And hopefully most of you have got over the shock of Matt's shirt. Actually, I'm feeling a little hard done by. If I'd been tipped off, I would have put on something decent. But there you go. You're going to just have to go with the regular. So we've got about 30 minutes this morning, and the topic is how operators are working with their owners, which obviously at this stage is pretty critical. And to do that with me, I'm delighted to say we've got two legends of the industry, Mark Willis, who is the CEO for Accor for the Middle East and Africa, and Elie Younes, who is Executive Vice President and CDO for Radisson Hotel Group. And hopefully both of them are going to join me now, assuming the tech keeps pace with the program. Mark, well, there he is.
Okay.
Mark, good morning.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. Where are you?
Look at us in our boring shirts.
What are we doing? I think we weren't properly briefed yet.
I hope Elie Younes has got something flamboyant on.
Well, you know, really, he doesn't need clothes to be flamboyant. It just comes.
No, that is very true.
Where is he? That's more to the point. Mr. Younes, are you planning to join us today?
Well, listen, if he doesn't join after nearly 20 years with Radisson, I'll answer the Radisson questions, no problem.
Perfect. No problem. I'm sure he'd be delighted.
Oh no, he's here. Look.
I made it.
No.
Elie, good morning.
I was a bit more exotic. I found a collarless shirt, so I couldn't get more exotic.
I think the term is Elie. I think it's grandfather collar.
Is it grandfather collar?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Elie, can I just ask a technical question? Have you made up your bed?
Well, housekeeping hasn't, because I'm in my hotel room. Forgive me.
I asked if you had made it up. I'm fully aware of the housekeeping standards. I'm just checking if you're still keeping.
I'm in Beirut, by the way. I'm in Beirut, by the way.
Well, welcome, and I hope you're enjoying it over there. It's one of my favorite cities. Gentlemen, firstly, thank you so much for joining us all. And as I said, we've got about 30 minutes. And I think, just bearing in mind, we've got a very widespread audience, and not all of them may be familiar with your organizations and their scale. If we could just start maybe with a sense of the big picture, if I may, and Elie, perhaps I can start with you. Just for the audience, just give us an understanding of where you are in Africa in terms of number of countries and number of hotels and brands, and a sense of how many of those hotels are currently open for trading.
Yeah. So today we're closing the mark on the 100 in terms of number of hotels on the continent, in terms of open and under construction. Half of these are meant to be open, and the other half are pipeline hotels for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years. Kind of out of those 50 hotels that we have in the trading portfolio, I would say 85 to 90% of them are open for business. It doesn't mean that all of them are fully occupied, but probably 85 to 90% are ready to accept guests. We have chosen during the crisis to try and stay open as possible, protects both the business and the people. So that was a strategic choice that we have made. Just without taking more time, Nick, to answer you concretely on the last part, which was the brands, our focus on the continent has been on three brands specifically. Our core brand, Radisson, which we recently introduced to the continent, Park Inn, and then Radisson Blue, which is probably one of the largest brands on the continent. So this is generally the big picture. Did I answer everything, or was there any part of answered, Nick?
How many countries are you present in at the moment?
32 out of the 54 countries have either a hotel under construction or an open hotel on the continent. So 32 out of the 54.
Okay, thanks. So actually, as an immediate reaction, most of the hotels are in some way open for trading, as you say, which is probably a lot more positive than many people might have thought. Mark, what does it look like from your situation in terms of how operations are? How many of your properties are currently open?
Well, first off, we're been on the continent a long time. First international brand into Africa. We're at 165 hotels across the continent. Very similar number with regards to countries as Elie. We're just under 30. We've got 70% of the hotels are open, which I think actually, and similar comment to Elie, I think it's very positive. You know, Africa is 6-8 weeks behind Asia with regards to the impact of COVID. So, yeah, I think it's a positive situation, and I would agree. I think we've also, where we could, try to keep hotels open, if only from a soft perspective. There's been a lot of community support, as is the norms of the location, so that has been good. And you know, the brands are pretty well represented across the continent. Accor's got over 35 brands, 5,000 hotels globally. So we're obviously got a huge global footprint, but Africa is an important one for us, especially North Africa, where we are particularly strong in Maghreb, across Algeria, Tunisia, and obviously Morocco with some 45 hotels.
And Mark, how many brands have you got out of those 35 that are in Africa at the moment?
We've got 17 across Africa.
Wow. Okay. So turning to the sort of crux of the discussion, I mean, along with guests, the international hotel industry is highly dependent on owners, and of course we need both to be solvent, right? We need guests to be able to afford and feel comfortable and confident to travel, and we'll talk about safety and security a little later. But we also need owners to be able to weather this storm. Given what you've said, which is a lot more positive than I thought it would be, how would you characterize the situation in Africa vis-a-vis your owners? What type of crisis are they having, and how critical or otherwise is it? And I realize it might be difficult to reply in a very generalized fashion, but just to give the audience a sense of how you see the owner's situation at the moment. Mark, perhaps I ask you first.
Listen, you're mentioning the word positive, and it's not a word we've used too much in the last 120 days since the pandemic has hit us. And I was trying to think of a few things here. You know, the interaction with owners, the communication has been absolutely everything with owners, and we've been assertive in our decision making, not least closing hotels. I was thinking about that yesterday as well, and trying to add up how many hotels I've closed in my career over the last 20 years at a senior level, and it was 23. But I'm getting old, so it could be that I'm mistaken, missing a few here and there. That's for sure. But you know, to then close 140 hotels in 30 days post-April, in collaboration with our owners, has been a huge feat. That's for sure. We've worked with owners on a number of fronts also. Responding to the impact of COVID, working with them in relation to their wider businesses, not least just the hotel asset, as the impact has been so huge, interacting and working with them, with their lenders, with banks, local authorities, and governments. And obviously the key focus has been, you know, the P&L and liquidity and cash flow, which has been absolutely paramount. Put all investments on hold. Any costs from central office we've either stopped or reduced, which has had a huge impact. And this P&L review and adjustment has been, a huge effort. And again, it's been done in a positive, collaborative way with owners as we've tried to impact payroll and cost infrastructures and take us through this period of huge negativity.
How do you think your owners would characterize your response if they were in the room with us? Would you think that they would say, we feel we're getting communicated with regularly enough? And who's leading that communication? Is that sort of coming from you and the general managers and on the ground, obviously?
I have to say, I think it's, at every level, and even from Sebastian down. He's wonderful with his communication, very proactive. We've done a lot of video communications and that type of thing from a central perspective. For me, for Africa, it's a slightly different owner environment, very similar to the Middle East. You've not got a lot of corporate organizations. It's a personal interaction with owners for the most part, independently wealthy individuals that have either one or more properties with Accor. And I think that communication from my side has been very regular. And again, I never had so much feedback from owners. And, there's this topic of support from owners. I think it's worth mentioning how supportive our owners have been. They've been super realistic in what has been a catastrophic period. Moreover, for our industry, I believe, than any other. And like I say, I think communication and collaboration with the owners has been a positive. And would they all be happy with the communication or the approach that we've taken? I'm sure there's some that aren't. But again, I think we've had a dialogue with those owners. We've explained our position. We've tried to deal with any kind of negative feedback in a positive manner. And again, it's been an unprecedented period for us all to deal with. That's for sure.
Elie, perhaps you can just comment on that, and perhaps also just give me a sense of, across most industries at the moment, one of the common themes that we're beginning to hear is that the crisis has required such a fundamental reappraisal of the business model and how you actually function that, there will be a change to the business model. Do you have a feeling that a lot of what you've done in terms of the way you look at cost and the way you're passing on savings effectively that you may be taking on the chin, do you think some of this may be permanent? Do you think your business will be more efficient when life gets back to normal?
Yeah. Let me just take this backwards for a second, Nick. I think the general theme that Mark has expressed, I think we generally had the same either approach or observations. What has been globally common here is that this problem had almost no variations based on geographies. It was almost a very common, to a very large extent, identical problem faced by everybody in this more or less the same way everywhere in the world. Surprisingly, I have to say, pleasantly so, everybody has taken the knockdown or the hit on the chin in a very mature, professional, to some extent, accepted kind of way, resilient. There has been, or at least I haven't observed, and to Mark's point, in some ways, there has been no hostility among stakeholders associated to as a result of what came with this devastating impact that we have all faced. Obviously, the issue, the cash flow, the working capital, the balance sheet, debt repayment impact has been devastating. and yet people have been resilient and really very maturely kind of reacting vis-a-vis the issue. Coming back to the follow-up point on the business model and the way we do business, I think there will be some permanent adjustments and some and probably some temporary adjustments. I just came to Beirut. Before we talk about the operational aspect. I was walking into a hotel yesterday here in Beirut, and I don't know if anybody has been through that. I had to go through a tunnel called disinfecting tunnel, and it sprays stuff on you as you walk through it for like 2 or 3 minutes, and then you go on the other side, presumably being disinfected from anything on your clothes. I mean, one small thing in the big scheme of things and the industry, but how things are quickly adjusting and adapting. Obviously, the experience in itself of the guests in the hotel, etc., will have to be permanently adjusted from that little example to all the safety protocols and the affiliations and the associations that we have to make sure the hotels are safe and clean and what have you. And I think we've all read enough on that. And that aspect will certainly permanently be adjusted. Together with it, probably what will also be permanently adjusted is the operational model in itself. I think we will all have to look at zero-based approach to the way we operate our business. This fixed cost, heavy aspect of the business model will have to change into a variable P&L approach. And unless we all do that ourselves and all our industry colleagues, I think we will not be able probably to sustain successfully in the long run in the industry. So there will probably be a permanent shift for the winners or for those who want to be winners on the cost base to shift the what was for many years or centuries a fixed based or fixed cost industry that has to some extent move more into a variable P&L, and that will probably also be permanent. Now, what may be temporary adjustment is the general big approach on branding and what have you. I think that the brand proliferation approach that we have seen over the last few years with one company launching brands every other week, confusing sometimes stakeholders, sometimes not, sometimes for valid reasons, sometimes for no real reasons. That brand proliferation will probably stop. People will be more focused on the basics when it comes to branding. So I wouldn't see in the next 2 or 3 years people launching another brand every other week, one brand for the 18 years old, one brand for the 20 years old, one brand for this group and that group. I think that approach will probably be temporary, stopped. I don't know if it will come back, but it will certainly, in my opinion, be
just picking up on that, Mark, because this is obviously a very important theme for owners, because owners are obviously focused on solvency. And, you know, it was characterized to me recently as operators are looking at how to unfix fixed costs. So to Elie's point, you know, a whole raft of costs are being looked at, which, you know, perceived wisdom in the industry would have had, oh, well, we can't do anything about that cost, it's fixed. And it's quite clear that, you know, given the situation we're in, that just wasn't going to be tenable in this crisis. Would you share that view? Do you actually think when we come out the other side, whether it's 18 months, 24 months, 3 years, 5 years, that the business will be much more efficient? And linked to that, I guess, is the other part of this puzzle for me, which is the arrival of third-party management companies, which we've seen obviously proliferate in the US. Now we've seen in Europe very, very strong growth, and we're beginning to see emerge in Africa and the Middle East, as you know.
Yeah.
And their fundamental premise is we can manage more efficiently than the major operators. And that is a saving that we're prepared to pass on to the owner. And, you know, we expect to be paid, but the owner is going to come out of this better than he would do. Is any thoughts on that?
Yeah, on the first point, let's all be realistic. We're in such a meltdown within the industry currently. It's while it's particularly difficult to see forward, one thing is for sure, getting back to a RevPAR of 2019 globally, if that's doable in the next 24, 36 months. And I saw the poll running before we came on. Let's hope that it is going to return within that 24 36 month period. But something has to give in that meantime, of course, and people are all focusing, not least us, with regards to fixed cost infrastructures, etc. But a lot of that also, don't forget, is driven around demand. If you look at where we sit today and business returning, of course, it's going to come country based and regionally as people look to have staycations and hotels are going to pick up that short lead in time business in the first instance. Everybody's been locked down, so there is that demand, and we could see that creeping in now, and that's obviously growing into regional, which is what you see now as people start to very much travel. But getting back to borderless travel, global travel, that is going to take some time, and the impact of that on our P&L on a number of fronts, whether it's business travel or leisure, or indeed meeting and events, which is another topic I'd rather not discuss in the short term. That's for sure. I mean, it looks dreadful, doesn't it? That is going to have a huge impact, and invariably the operators need to, like Accor and to Elie's point, like Radisson, we need to respond to that environment and adjust the P&L accordingly. And again, that needs to be done in conjunction with our owners. We're a managed portfolio across Africa. So you need to be mindful of your owner's financial situation, their own liquidity, again, their other businesses, etc. To the third party point, this isn't the US. We're not franchised. It's Africa, it's Middle East. And yes, you're right, Nick, of course, they're starting to come. But I think the third parties can do the job and have the infrastructure. I'm 260 people here on the ground with very limited fees coming in, as you can imagine. Yes, the hotels are open, and again, along with Elie's point, but it's very limited trading with minimal occupancy and minimal rate, which obviously we're in the fee business, means limited fees for us. However, that infrastructure is still in place. We're still supporting our owners as best as we can, and I don't think it's so difficult for those parties or so easy for those parties to come into locations like Africa and have the impact that they've had in the States. That's for sure.
Mark, can I just pick up on something there in terms of trading, and perhaps we can just talk about trading for a minute.
Sure.
Domestic traffic as it relates to Africa. Obviously, one of the general assumptions that's driving thinking on the recovery is that we've, in the US, particularly Asia, where there's drive-to markets, you're going to pick up leisure. That obviously is a little bit more complicated to envisage in Africa. But have you seen any resilience in the domestic market, given obviously that long haul coming into Africa has been pretty challenged?
Yeah, if you look at the domestic market in Africa, it's huge. It's always been between that 70-80% of total business across the continent, driven out of those key destinations, Morocco, Nigeria, and of course South Africa, Nigeria, South Africa and Kenya. We see demand increasing, but listen, I make such a comment, and again, coming back to your point of using the word positive, I'm cautious. When I say demand increasing, we're coming from nothing to something, and I think we need to be mindful of that. However, it is turning. Demand is increasing. You do start to see country-based demand has definitely increased, whether it be leisure or some business demand starting to, or corporate demand starting to return. And where it's possible to travel intra-country, you can see that people are taking that opportunity. And again, locations that have always been on the forefront or on the front foot with regards to corporate business, places like South Africa and Nigeria and Kenya. As soon as things open a little, those guys will jump on that and try and drive their businesses forward, as is the mentality and the culture of those locations. So yes, it'll start to return, and we're seeing that. We're seeing that slowly but surely.
Elie, just carrying on that theme in terms of trading, I actually heard the statistic yesterday, which was quite a stunning statistic, which was the CEO of Safair in South Africa saying that business traffic or traffic through South African airports was at 0.5% in Q2. And there were only 2 airlines that were actually flying, Safair and Mango. This in obviously one of the most significant economies on the continent. So sort of, effectively a 99.5% decline. Thoughts on trading currently in terms of the important priority markets for you? South Africa, obviously, you're quite a big player. You've got all your brands represented down there. Thoughts on trading in South Africa and elsewhere, if you can just give us a sense of how you see it?
Generally speaking, do you allow me to come back on a previous point, Nick, as well, about these third-party operators? Do you have your permission? Yeah. I think what's important to mention that, Nick, are 2 things: is the cost of doing business for the third-party operators, because it tends to be more expensive to do that rather than for companies who have established platforms on the ground with scale, because it's all about eventually scalability. Do you have sufficient scale to the extent that the cost of doing business on a per unit basis goes down? This is basic economics. But also this goes also to the point of the nature of the operator. The more the operator turns itself into a demand generator by having brands and proliferates through its brands, the less that operator becomes relevant to manage hotels, because it simply has changed its identity and focusing on other things. And the more the operator is focused on a narrow amount of brands, the more it's relevant to manage hotels. And that's that aspect of the industry. I think that will probably evolve as time goes by. More operators, I think there will be more brand generators, and the operators with the brands also who manage hotels. There will probably be that shift over the next few years. And thank you for that permission. Coming back to the trading globally, for the last few weeks, we've been counting our reservations on a daily basis. And for the first time, for the last 3 weeks, we started to see a trend, whereas we started to have more bookings than cancellations. And our bookings, for example, last week for the full week has been equal to more or less 50% or 55% of the same bookings we have captured in the same week last year. Now, this is a very basic KPI, but at least the story behind it is positive in terms of the booking trends to the system or through the system. Generally speaking, hotels, however, are trading at 20 to 25% occupancy globally, predominantly driven by domestic demand. Okay, so people within the country, by domestic demand, we're talking more or less about simplistically people driving the car. Okay, so people not taking a plane. So this is for Lehman's definition. For this purpose, domestic demand means somebody taking his car or the train, not the plane, to go from point A to point B. This is what we define today as domestic demand. So all the markets with a high trend of domestic demand probably are benefiting or are recovering faster today than those with international demand, to the extent that it's becoming interestingly noticeable that sometimes what was B and C locations in Europe, for example, we come to the Africa in a second, is doing better than what was A location, because B and C locations are more domestic than the A locations. When it comes to Africa, obviously, in the case of South Africa, situation is not due to the lack of demand, international demand. It's due to policy. and we have to follow policy. The government, the country is in lockdown, governmental lockdown. So even if you wish to go on a safari today to South Africa, you cannot even go there. You're not legally allowed to do that. So it's not the demand issue there, it's also the ability, the policy behind it. Generally speaking, despite that, some of our hotels that are open in South Africa are doing reasonably okay. By reasonably okay, we mean they are self-funded. You don't pick up the phone and call your owner and say, "Hello, Mr. Owner, I need money to fund your working capital." If this is the case, we would rather to shut down the hotel. So in the instances where the working capital is funded through the whatever revenue comes from that domestic demand, even in South Africa, we keep the hotels open. Although the cross Africa story is around 20% occupancy, although we do have some extremely success stories, like in Nigeria, because of that domestic demand, we've done 90%. But this is not the rule. The rule is 20 to 25% today, which is almost just sufficient to pay for your working capital.
In the last few minutes of our session, and I know we could chat easily for another half hour, but just if I can put you on the spot a little, and just ask you,
if it's a really difficult question, Elie will answer, don't worry.
That's I'll ask Elie first.
I'll call my wife.
That's a lunch you owe me, Mark.
Yeah, you're right.
Elie, starting with you as per Mark's instruction, give me a view on when you think we'll see 2019 numbers again, and I need a year from you. And then second part of the question, when you close the books on 2020 in Africa, what is the depth of the decline that you're expecting? Is it 50% by the end of the year? Is it 40? Is it 80? Give me a sense of both of those.
Okay. Back to 2019 levels. We've done all kind of analysis, pandemics and what have you, and financial crisis, combining the two together, etc., etc. You read all kind of reports in the industry from McKinsey, from, I don't want to name names, but different opinions. My opinion is 2022-2023, back to 2019 levels. I think we will recover back to 2016 and 17 levels quicker, but then to go back to that peak, it will take longer time, by probably mid-2023. That is me speaking.
Where do you think?
The next question was about Africa. Africa will probably be, if we close the books on Africa, it will probably be 25% of 2019 on the books, but depends what your books are, because my books also is organic growth. And when I look at our signings for this year, for example, we already signed 7 hotels in Africa, which is in line with 2000. So with a bit of strike of luck, let's call it, we may even have the same result from a signing and organic growth perspective as last year. But by books here, referring to your P&L.
Yeah, P&L, 25% down. Okay.
No, 25%.
75% down.
75% down. 20, yeah.
Okay.
So the books will be 25% off last year, which is more.
Mark, from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, as far as Africa goes, don't forget it's 6 to 8 weeks behind Asia coming in. So they didn't feel the impact of the pandemic in earnest until late May. From a hotel closure perspective, we were already closing hotels in Middle East, at the latter part of April into May, and Africa May into June. So you've got that extra small piece of trading, which is only small, but obviously it makes a difference. From a RevPAR perspective, it's going to be around the 75-80% decline in RevPAR versus 2019, which is catastrophic. And again, as I mentioned already, like nothing we've ever seen, of course. However, Africa is, as we have learned over many, many years, especially with locations like Morocco, especially in Egypt, Africa bounces back. If you look at recovery post 2009, Egypt rebounded within 18 months. The rest of the globe, 36. So, I'm hopeful of a rebound in Africa, and I think also the continental business and the amount of regional business, which we know will return before anything else, will see Africa return solidly versus other locations. And again, you can use the US as quite a good benchmark. If you see trading in the US now approaching 50% occupancy levels already, and they have disaster there, of course, as well from a COVID impact perspective. So from a return to business, I think once you get into 2022 and out of that into 2023, I think you'll be back at 2019 levels. And again, not forgetting that 2019 was an extremely positive year for the continent in general.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Hopefully everyone has found that a great start to the day, and really appreciate you both joining us this morning. I'm going to hand back to our wonderful host, Matt.
Thank you. And next time, gentlemen, think brighter. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Elie. Thank you.